You'll never be more than a mid-level manager here. That smirk, that perfectly practiced half-smile she wore while stealing credit for the Carlson Capital deal, while deliberately excluding me from strategic client meetings. I thought I understood the corporate game after 10 years of playing it, but she'd just made a fatal mistake, assuming I was still playing by her rules. The champagne at her promotion party tasted like battery acid. Everyone was toasting to the new vice president of investments. I raised my glass too, already planning exactly how I'd destroy everything she'd built on lies and betrayal. My name is Claire Reynolds, and I've spent the last decade of my life building something from nothing at Ravenbrook Capital. 34 years old, managing investment portfolios worth tens of millions, and somehow still considered an outsider by people like Lydia Marlowe. I started as an analyst fresh out of Northwestern, sleeping 4 hours a night, triple-checking every calculation, memorizing every client's middle name and their kids' birthdays. While others networked at country clubs, I was debugging financial models at 2 a.m. My desk drawer held protein bars and instant coffee, not invitations to Martha's Vineyard. Lydia joined Ravenbrook 4 years ago, walking in like she owned the place, which, given her family's Boston banking dynasty, wasn't far from the truth. Her mess bags, Louboutin heels, and that particular way of laughing that only people who've never worried about money can manage. She'd touch my shoulder and call me sweetie while systematically undermining every project I led. The Carlson Capital acquisition? I'd spent 3 months cultivating that relationship, flying to Detroit every week, sitting through endless dinners with their conservative board members. The day before we closed, Lydia swooped in for the final meeting, just to provide senior support, sweetie, and somehow emerged as the deal's champion. My analysis became the team's work. My strategy became our collective vision. But I could handle that. What I couldn't stomach was her surgical precision in cutting me off from my own clients. The Hendersons, who I'd guided through the 2008 crisis, suddenly only wanted to meet when I was traveling. The Nakamura Foundation, whose portfolio I'd tripled, started requesting Lydia for their quarterly reviews. Each time, she'd flutter those extensions and say, "They specifically asked for me. I hope you understand it's nothing personal." The vice president position had been my North Star for 2 years. David Sterling, our division head, had practically promised it to me last Christmas. "Keep doing what you're doing, Claire. Your time is coming." I'd restructured our entire emerging market strategy, brought in $40 million in new assets, mentored half the junior staff. Then Lydia started having lunch with Ethan Brooks, our CEO, married, 53, with a weakness for women who looked like his second wife had 20 years ago. Their lunches became dinner meetings. Their dinner meetings became conference trips where they'd mysteriously book the same red-eye flight back. I wasn't naive. I'd seen this movie before. But I'd stupidly believed that my work would speak louder than whatever was happening in those after-hours strategy sessions. The breaking point came during the quarterly planning meeting. 20 senior managers around a mahogany table, discussing the VP appointment. Lydia leaned back in her chair, addressing the room but looking directly at me. "Cultural fit is just as important as performance metrics," she said, her manicured fingers tracing the rim of her coffee cup. "We need someone who embodies Ravenbrook's values. Someone who understands that this isn't just about numbers on a spreadsheet, it's about belonging." The room went quiet. Everyone knew what she meant. I was the girl from the Minnesota factory town, the daughter of a machinist and a night shift nurse, the one who'd never summered in the Hamptons or sailed in Nantucket, the one who didn't belong. That night, I found something interesting in our shared drive. Lydia had accessed my client folders 47 times in the past month, not just browsing, downloading contact lists, copying my correspondence, studying my investment strategies. She'd been mapping my entire professional DNA, preparing to absorb my book of business the moment she got that promotion. Standing in my empty apartment, staring at the Chicago skyline, I made a decision. If Lydia wanted to play by the real rules of this world, the ugly, brutal, unspoken ones, then I'd show her what someone from the wrong side of the tracks could do when they stopped pretending the game was fair. I pulled out my laptop and started a new folder. I named it Due Diligence. The internal meeting was scheduled for 3 p.m. on a Tuesday that smelled like rain and disappointment. Lydia had orchestrated it perfectly. A team alignment session that was really her victory lap before the official announcement. She stood at the head of the conference room, wearing a cream-colored Chanel suit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. The PowerPoint behind her read, "Elevating Our Standards, a Vision for Excellence." Every slide was a masterclass in corporate doublespeak, but her message was crystal clear. As we move forward, she said, clicking to a slide about cultural synergy, we need to ensure everyone on this team represents the Ravenbrook brand. Our clients expect a certain sophistication. They want to work with people who speak their language, who understand their world. She paused at my name on the org chart. Claire, you've done admirable work with the technical aspects of portfolio management. Really admirable. But perhaps it's time to consider whether your strengths might be better utilized in a more analytical capacity, behind the scenes, where you're comfortable. The room was full of cowards who studied their phones and notebooks. Only Marcus, another analyst who'd started when I did, met my eyes with something like sympathy. I'm perfectly comfortable right where I am, I said, my voice steady as a sniper's aim. In fact, I'm curious about your sudden interest in my client files. 47 access logs in 30 days seems excessive for someone concerned about cultural fit. Her smile flickered like a bad connection. I believe in understanding the full scope of our team's work. Collaboration, Claire. You should try it sometime. That evening, I sat in my office after everyone had left, watching the cleaning crew work their way through the building. My phone buzzed with the email I'd been dreading. From David Sterling. Subject: Leadership Announcement Team. I'm pleased to announce that Lydia Marlowe will be stepping into the role of Vice President of Investment Operations, effective immediately. I didn't read the rest. Instead, I walked to the break room and poured myself 3 fingers of the emergency bourbon someone kept hidden behind the coffee supplies. The burn felt appropriate. My phone rang. Sarah Martinez, my old roommate from Northwestern, who now worked compliance at Goldman. Heard the news, she said without preamble. You okay? Define okay. Not plotting murder. Not murder. I took another sip. Something better. Sarah laughed, dark and knowing. Remember what I always say about these people? They all have secrets. The higher they climb, the more dirt they leave on the ladder. What if I told you she's been accessing my client files without authorization? I'd say that's a compliance violation, but hardly enough to take down a new VP with the CEO in her corner. Sarah paused. Unless there's more. I thought about the reservation confirmations I'd stumbled across while checking my client meeting history. The St. Regis, always. Room 1247, always Thursday afternoons. Always billed to a corporate card under client development. There might be more, I said. Claire. Sarah's voice carried a warning. If you're going to do this, you need to be smart. These people don't just fight back, they destroy you. They'll make sure you never work in finance again. I stared at my reflection in the dark window, seeing my mother's determined jaw, my father's calculating eyes. What if I don't care about working in finance again? Then God help whoever pissed you off. That night, I went home and opened my laptop. The due diligence folder stared back at me, empty and waiting. I created 3 subfolders: professional misconduct, personal leverage, and nuclear options. Then I started with something simple, cross-referencing Lydia's expense reports with Ethan Brooks's calendar. The patterns emerged like constellations. Every Thursday, client meeting matched with his strategic planning sessions. Every weekend conference mysteriously extended by an extra night. But affairs were messy, unpredictable weapons. They could backfire. Make me look petty and vindictive. No, I needed something cleaner, something that would destroy not just her reputation, but her freedom. I pulled up our trading records and started matching them against her husband's law firm's M&A announcements. Finance was riddled with regulations. and Lydia had always been sloppy with details she considered beneath her. 3 hours later, I found it. A pattern of trades that preceded major acquisitions her husband's firm had handled. Nothing obvious. She was smarter than that, but enough to establish a pattern that would interest the SEC. I leaned back in my chair, allowing myself the first real smile in weeks. Lydia thought she'd won by pushing me into the shadows. She had no idea that shadows were where people like me did our best work. The official announcement came with champagne and fake smiles in the executive conference room. Lydia stood next to Ethan Brooks, her hand occasionally brushing his arm in a way that would seem accidental to anyone who hadn't watched them for months. Lydia brings a unique combination of strategic vision and cultural sophistication to this role, Ethan said, raising his glass. She understands what Ravenbrook needs to compete at the highest levels. I stood in the back, sipping champagne that tasted like defeat. Around me, colleagues offered hollow congratulations, their eyes avoiding mine. They knew what had happened. Everyone always knows. They just pretend not to see. Claire! Lydia's voice cut through the murmur. She was walking toward me, arms extended for a hug I didn't want. I hope you know how much I value your contributions. I'm looking forward to working with you in this new capacity. Congratulations, I said, accepting her embrace while memorizing the scent of her perfume. Tom Ford, Black Orchid. The kind of detail that seems meaningless until you need to prove someone was somewhere they shouldn't have been. She pulled back, studying my face. No hard feelings. I know you wanted this too. May the best woman win, I said, and watched something flicker in her eyes. Uncertainty? Maybe. Or recognition that I wasn't going to crumble like she'd expected. That night, I met Sarah at a dive bar in Wicker Park, the kind of place where Lydia Marlowe wouldn't be caught dead. You look surprisingly calm for someone who just got professionally murdered, Sarah said, sliding a beer across the scarred wooden table. Anger is energy, I replied. You just have to know how to channel it. Sarah leaned forward. So what's the plan? Please tell me you have a plan that doesn't involve anything that could get you arrested. I pulled out my phone and showed her a photo I'd taken of the office directory. Did you know that Jonathan Marlowe's law firm represents 3 of our biggest institutional clients? Lydia's husband. Sarah's eyebrows rose. That's problematic. It gets better. Guess who's been feeding him information about our investment strategies for those exact clients? You're joking. She's been using our confidential client data to help her husband's firm position themselves better in negotiations. I have emails, Sarah, forwarded from her Ravenbrook account to his personal Gmail. Sarah whistled low. That's not just a firing offense. That's criminal. But it's not enough, I said, taking a long pull from my beer. Ethan would protect her, make it disappear. I need something he can't bury. What about the affair? I shook my head. Too messy. Too much collateral damage. His wife doesn't deserve that public humiliation. I paused. But Jonathan Marlowe does deserve to know what his wife is doing, both professionally and personally. Sarah was quiet for a moment. You're going to tell him? Eventually. But first, I need more evidence, the kind that holds up in court and in the court of public opinion. We sat in silence, watching hipsters play pool badly. Finally, Sarah spoke. You know what you need? Access to her computer. Real access, not just shared drives. Impossible. She never leaves her laptop unlocked. No, but she does leave her desktop on when she goes to her Thursday afternoon meetings. Sarah made air quotes. And if someone were to install a simple keystroke logger, that's illegal. So is insider trading. So is corporate espionage. Sarah signaled for another round. The question is, how far are you willing to go? I thought about my parents, calling to congratulate me on a promotion I didn't get. About the decade I'd spent believing that hard work and talent were enough. About every snide comment, every stolen opportunity. Every time Lydia had called me sweetie while sliding a knife between my ribs. All the way, I said. Sarah raised her glass. Then let me introduce you to a friend who specializes in corporate security consulting. Technically, he shows companies their vulnerabilities, but he might be willing to do some freelance work. As we clinked glasses, my phone buzzed with a LinkedIn notification. Lydia had updated her profile. Vice President of Investment Operations at Ravenbrook Capital. Grateful for the opportunity to elevate our firm's standards and culture. I screenshotted it. Everything was evidence now. Every post, every email, every casual cruelty. She thought she'd knocked me out of the game, but I was just getting started. The cold October wind hit us as we left the bar. Sarah turned to me, concern creasing her face. Claire, once you start this, there's no going back. She'll try to destroy you. I thought about the folder growing on my laptop, about the reservations at the St. Regis, about the trades that preceded her husband's deals, about the 47 unauthorized access logs. She already tried, I said. Now it's my turn. The breakthrough came at 11:47 p.m. on a Wednesday, while I was cross-referencing expense reports with hotel bookings. My eyes were burning from staring at spreadsheets. But then I saw it, a pattern so obvious I couldn't believe I'd missed it. Every Thursday afternoon, Lydia blocked her calendar for portfolio review. Every Thursday afternoon. Ethan Brooks had off-site strategic planning. And every Thursday afternoon, room 1247 at the St. Enos. Regis was charged to a Ravenbrook corporate card under miscellaneous client expenses. But that wasn't the smoking gun. The smoking gun was the jewelry store charges that appeared exactly one day before each reservation. Tiffany, Cartier, Harry Winston, always on Ethan's personal card. Always just under the $10,000 reporting threshold. I leaned back, rubbing my temples. Sarah's friend, a security consultant named Tommy who looked like he lived on energy drinks and paranoia, had delivered beyond expectations. The keystroke logger had been active for 2 weeks, capturing every email, every password, every deleted draft Lydia thought was gone forever, including the one where she'd written to her college roommate. E is getting divorced. His lawyer says it'll be final by spring. Then we can stop sneaking around like teenagers. I'd also discovered something else. Lydia had been running a side game I hadn't even suspected. She was feeding information to a hedge fund run by her former business school classmates. Not just market insights, actual client positions, planned trades, confidential strategies. They were front-running our biggest moves, skimming millions. The evidence was all there, hidden in encoded spreadsheets she thought she'd deleted. But Tommy had recovered everything from the cached temp files. Lydia might have understood high society, but she didn't understand technology. My phone rang. Unknown number. Claire Reynolds. The voice was male, professional, tired. Yes? This is Jonathan Marlowe. I understand you work with my wife. My heart stopped. Had Lydia found out? Was this a trap? Yes, I do. How can I help you? There was a long pause. I'm going to be direct, Ms. Reynolds. I've noticed some irregularities in our financial statements. Purchases I didn't authorize. Trips that don't align with the stories I've been told. I've also heard rumors. The kind that circulate in Chicago's financial district. I stayed silent, letting him fill the void. I need to know the truth, he continued. And I believe you might be someone who values truth over corporate politics. We agreed to meet the next morning at a coffee shop in the Loop, far from Ravenbrook's offices. Jonathan Marlowe looked exactly like his LinkedIn photo, silver-haired, distinguished, with the kind of exhausted eyes you see in emergency room doctors and divorce lawyers. Before we begin, he said, setting down his coffee, I need to know why you're willing to talk to me. What's your angle? Your wife destroyed my career because I don't have a trust fund or a maiden name that opens doors, I said simply. She's currently sitting in the office I earned, collecting the salary I deserved, managing the clients I cultivated. So yes, I have an angle. But everything I'm about to show you is true. I pulled out my laptop and began with the simple stuff. The hotel reservations, the jewelry purchases, the Thursday afternoon patterns. Jonathan's face remained impassive, but his knuckles whitened as he gripped his coffee cup. Then I showed him the professional violations. The insider information passed to his firm, the front-running scheme with the hedge fund, the systematic theft of confidential client data. This is, he started, then stopped. This is criminal. Yes, I agreed. It is. Why haven't you reported this? Because Ethan Brooks would bury it. He's protected her so far. But he can't protect her from you. And he can't protect her from federal investigators if the evidence comes from multiple sources. Jonathan was quiet for a long moment, studying me. You've thought this through. Your wife taught me that being good at my job wasn't enough. She was right. Sometimes you have to be good at the game too. He pulled out his phone and showed me a text from Lydia. Working late again tonight, don't wait up. It's Thursday, he said quietly. She thinks I'm in New York for a deposition. Room 1247, I said. They usually arrive separately. Her first, around 2 p.m. Him about 15 minutes later. Jonathan stood, pulling on his coat. Ms. Reynolds, I'm going to need copies of everything you've shown me. Everything. Already uploaded to a secure drive. I handed him a card with the login details. Mr. Marlowe, there's something else. The hedge fund scheme. It involves dozens of trades over 2 years. The SEC will freeze assets immediately once they start investigating. He nodded slowly. I'll have my assets separated by Monday. Thank you for the warning. As he turned to leave, I called after him. Why did you believe me? You don't even know me. He looked back, sadness etched in every line of his face. Because 3 months ago, she accidentally called me Ethan during dinner. She played it off. But I knew. I've been waiting for someone brave enough to tell me the truth. After he left, I sat in the coffee shop, watching the rain streak the windows. Phase 1 was in motion. Jonathan Marlowe was a meticulous lawyer with a reputation for thoroughness. He wouldn't just divorce Lydia, he'd dissect her. But I wasn't done. The divorce would hurt her personally. But I wanted professional annihilation. I wanted her name to become a cautionary tale whispered at industry conferences. I opened my phone and scrolled to a contact labeled SEC Whistleblower Hotline. It was time for Phase 2. The celebration for Lydia's promotion was scheduled for Friday evening at the Ritz-Carlton. Ravenbrook had spared no expense, open bar, past hors d'oeuvres, and a jazz quartet that probably cost more than my monthly rent. The irony wasn't lost on me that I'd been tasked with finalizing the catering order. I arrived deliberately late, wearing my best black dress, the one I'd bought for last year's awards dinner where I'd won Portfolio Manager of the Year. Lydia hadn't attended that event. She'd been in Aspen with Ethan and a select group of strategic partners. The ballroom was packed with Chicago's financial elite. Lydia held court near the windows, resplendent in a gold Versace dress, laughing at something Ethan whispered in her ear. His wife stood 10 feet away, nursing a martini and pretending not to notice. Jonathan Marlowe was notably absent. When someone asked, Lydia waved dismissively. Urgent business in New York. You know how lawyers are, married to the job. I moved through the crowd, making small talk, playing the gracious colleague. Then I spotted my opening. Jonathan had arrived after all, standing in the doorway like a man attending his own funeral. He caught my eye and nodded slightly. Jonathan! Lydia's voice pitched high with surprise. I thought you were. Meeting ended early, he said, kissing her cheek with the precision of a practiced husband. I wouldn't miss your big night. I watched Lydia recalibrate, her smile tightening imperceptibly. Of course, let me get you a drink. Actually, Jonathan said, loud enough for nearby guests to hear. I was hoping we could talk privately first. I have some questions about our American Express statement, some unusual charges. The color drained from Lydia's face. Now? Darling, can't this wait? I'm afraid not, particularly the Thursday afternoon charges at the St. Regis, every week, for the past 6 months. The jazz quartet played on, but a bubble of silence expanded around them. Ethan Brooks had gone very still, his wife now watching with laser focus. There's obviously an explanation. Lydia laughed, brittle as winter ice. Client meetings. In room 1247? Jonathan's voice was calm, lethal. The same room Mr. Brooks has been charging to Ravenbrook's corporate account? Ethan's wife set down her martini with a sharp click. Perhaps, Jonathan continued, pulling out his phone. You could explain this text you sent yesterday. Can't wait for Thursday. He bought me something special from Cartier. The room had gone completely silent now, everyone pretending not to stare while hanging on every word. Jonathan, please. Lydia reached for his arm. He stepped back. My lawyer will be in touch. Oh, and Lydia? You might want to check with IT about your email access. Seems someone's been forwarding proprietary Ravenbrook information to external hedge funds. The SEC will probably want to discuss that with you. He turned and walked out, leaving Lydia standing alone in her gold dress, mouth opening and closing like a landed fish. Is it true? Ethan's wife had moved closer, her voice carrying across the ballroom. The Thursday afternoons. Ethan tried to speak, but she held up a hand. Don't. Just don't. She followed Jonathan's exit, pulling out her phone as she walked. Within seconds, Ethan's phone started buzzing. He looked at the screen and his face went white. His lawyer, no doubt. I slipped over to the bar, ordering a glass of champagne. Marcus appeared beside me, whistling low. Did you know that was going to happen? He asked. How could I possibly know? I took a sip, savoring the bubbles. I'm just a mid-level manager who doesn't understand the culture here. David Sterling, our division head, was making his way through the crowd toward Lydia and Ethan, his expression grim. The board members present were already huddled in conference, their legal instincts kicking in. Lydia saw them coming and did the only thing she could. She ran. Literally. Grabbed her clutch and rushed toward the exit, her heels clicking against marble like a countdown timer. But I'd saved the best for last. As she reached the lobby, two men in dark suits approached her. FBI agents, Sarah's friend Tommy had mentioned they'd been building a case against the hedge fund for months. Lydia's information had been the missing piece. Ms. Marlowe, we need to ask you some questions about your relationship with Cerberus Capital Management. Through the ballroom windows, I watched them escort her out. She looked back once, scanning the crowd until her eyes found mine. In that moment, she knew. I raised my champagne glass in a small toast. Ladies and gentlemen, David Sterling's voice boomed over the microphone. I apologize, but we need to conclude tonight's event early due to an unexpected situation. As the crowd dispersed, murmuring with the kind of excitement that only comes from witnessing someone else's spectacular downfall, I finished my champagne and headed for the exit. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. Check Bloomberg in 5 minutes. I smiled. Phase 2 was complete. By Monday morning, Lydia Marlowe wouldn't just be divorced and unemployed, she'd be radioactive. No firm in Chicago would touch her. The best part? I hadn't lied once. I'd simply made sure the truth was impossible to ignore. The Monday after the party. I arrived at Ravenbrook at 6 a.m., 2 hours before my usual time. The building felt different, charged with the electricity that follows scandal. Security guards whispered in corners. The overnight cleaning crew lingered, hoping to overhear something worth sharing. My plan for Phase 2 had been meticulous. 18 months of Lydia's trades documented and cross-referenced. But I hadn't anticipated how quickly the dominoes would fall once Jonathan Marlowe started pulling threads. By 7 a.m., my encrypted folder was ready. 3 USB drives containing everything: the unauthorized client file access, the hotel records, the jewelry receipts, but most importantly, the hedge fund connection. Cerberus Capital Management had made $47 million in profits from trades that mysteriously preceded Ravenbrook's major moves. Every trade traced back to information only Lydia could have provided. I'd spent the weekend creating a forensic trail that any first-year analyst could follow. Timestamps matched, IP addresses aligned. Even her deleted calendar entries, recovered from cached server data, showed meetings with Cerberus principals conveniently scheduled before major trades. The first USB went to the SEC through their whistleblower portal, complete with a detailed timeline and analysis. The second went to FINRA, focusing on the regulatory violations. The third went to the Illinois Attorney General's office, highlighting the criminal fraud aspects. By 9 a.m., Ravenbrook's executive floor was in chaos. Through the glass walls, I could see David Sterling pacing his office, phone pressed to his ear. Legal had commandeered the main conference room. Ethan Brooks was notably absent. Rumor had it his wife's attorney had already frozen their joint assets. At 9:47 a.m., the FBI returned, this time with boxes and a warrant. They went straight to Lydia's office, which she hadn't even had time to properly move into. They emerged 3 hours later with her computer, files, and even her collection of designer bags. Apparently, some had been purchased with laundered funds. Marcus stopped by my desk around noon, eyes wide. "Did you see the Bloomberg article?" I pulled it up, feigning surprise at the headline. Ravenbrook Capital VP under federal investigation for insider trading scheme. The article was devastating. Someone had leaked details about the Cerberus connection, the affair with Ethan, even the Thursday afternoon hotel meetings. There was a particularly damning quote from an anonymous source familiar with the matter, stating that Lydia had betrayed client trust for personal gain, describing specific trades with uncanny accuracy. "Who do you think leaked this?" Marcus asked. "Could be anyone," I said. "Jonathan Marlowe's law firm, someone from Cerberus trying to get ahead of the story. Maybe even someone internal who knew what was happening." What Marcus didn't know was that I'd sent an anonymous package to 3 financial journalists on Sunday night, complete with enough verified information to ensure they'd run the story. The court of public opinion mattered as much as actual court. At 2 p.m., an internal email went out from the board of directors. Lydia Marlowe had been terminated effective immediately. Ethan Brooks was taking an indefinite leave of absence. A forensic audit would begin immediately, led by an external firm. Then came the part I hadn't orchestrated but deeply appreciated. At 3 p.m., the Delaware Attorney General's office announced they were investigating a shell company registered there, Marlowe Consulting LLC. Lydia had been funneling the kickbacks from Cerberus through it, thinking Delaware's corporate privacy laws would protect her. She'd forgotten that Delaware took corporate fraud very seriously when federal agencies came knocking. By 4 p.m., local news vans had appeared outside our building. Lydia's LinkedIn profile had been deleted. Her Twitter account made private. But the internet never forgets. Screenshots were already circulating, including her post about elevating standards at Ravenbrook. David Sterling called an emergency all-hands meeting at 5 p.m. Standing at the podium where Lydia had accepted her promotion just days ago, he looked aged by a decade. "I want to address the situation directly," he began. "We've identified serious violations of both regulatory requirements and client trust. We're cooperating fully with all investigations. Those responsible will face the full consequences of their actions." He paused, scanning the room. "I also want to apologize. We failed in our oversight. We allowed personal relationships to cloud professional judgment. That stops now." After the meeting, he pulled me aside. "Claire, I owe you an apology too. The promotion should have been yours." "I appreciate that," I said carefully. "The board is meeting tomorrow. With Lydia gone and Ethan likely facing criminal charges, we need stable leadership. Are you interested?" I thought about the past 6 months, the humiliation, the rage, the meticulous planning. "I'll need to think about it." "Of course. But Claire?" He lowered his voice. "Next time someone deserves to be exposed, maybe give me a heads up first. Could save us all some headlines." He walked away before I could respond, leaving me to wonder how much he'd figured out. That evening, I sat in my apartment with the news playing in the background. Lydia's mugshot flashed on screen. She'd been arrested at her Lake Forest mansion, designer luggage already packed. The anchor mentioned that authorities had frozen over $3 million in assets, with more seizures expected. Sarah texted, "Phase 2 complete. What's Phase 3? I typed back, "There is no Phase 3, it's over." But as I looked at the vice president offer David had implied, I realized something. Destroying Lydia had been necessary, but it wasn't the ending. The ending would be me taking that position and doing it right. No affairs, no stolen credit, no insider trading, just competence, hard work, and the knowledge that I'd earned every single achievement. The girl from the Minnesota factory town was about to show Chicago what real class looked like. Tuesday morning arrived with the kind of harsh November sunlight that makes Chicago feel like a city made of knives. I'd barely slept. Adrenaline still coursing through my veins from yesterday's controlled demolition of Lydia's life. At 8:30 a.m., Jonathan Marlowe walked into Ravenbrook's lobby with a battalion of lawyers, not just divorce attorneys, corporate litigators, forensic accountants, and 2 former federal prosecutors. They moved through our offices like a SWAT team, heading straight for the executive conference room where the board had assembled for an emergency session. Through the glass walls, I watched Jonathan lay out documents with surgical precision. His expression was carved from stone, but his hands moved with the confidence of a man who'd already won. Whatever prenup Lydia had signed, it clearly hadn't anticipated federal racketeering charges. By 10 a.m., the real show began. 3 black SUVs pulled up outside, FBI, SEC, and FINRA investigators poured into the building, this time with expanded warrants. They weren't just looking at Lydia anymore, they were examining the entire executive structure. Ethan Brooks arrived 15 minutes later, flanked by his legal team. His usual swagger had evaporated, replaced by the hollow look of a man watching his empire crumble. His wife's divorce attorney was already inside, having filed papers that morning citing adultery and financial fraud. The rumor mill suggested she'd hired the same firm that had eviscerated the CEO of a major pharmaceutical company last year. David Sterling called me to his office at noon. "The board is meeting in an hour," he said, rubbing his temples. "They want you there." "Why?" "Because you're the only senior manager who isn't implicated in this mess. Your records are clean, your clients trust you. And frankly," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "they suspect you knew something was wrong before the rest of us." The boardroom felt like a tribunal. 5 board members sat along one side of the table, their faces grave. Jonathan Marlowe occupied the far end, still laying out evidence with methodical precision. "Ms. Reynolds," the board chair began, "we need to understand the full scope of what's happened here. How deep does this corruption go?" I chose my words carefully. Based on what's now public, Lydia systematically violated client trust for personal gain. The Cerberus scheme alone involved 47 separate trades over 18 months. But the rot goes deeper. I pulled out my laptop. "With your permission, I'd like to share some analysis I've conducted on unusual trading patterns in other portfolios." For the next 30 minutes, I walked them through what I'd discovered, not just Lydia's crimes, but a network of smaller violations. Junior managers front-running trades, expense report fraud, procurement kickbacks. Ravenbrook had become a feeding ground for those who thought proximity to power meant immunity from consequences. "How did you compile this?" one board member asked. "I've been documenting irregularities for 2 years," I said simply. I tried raising concerns through proper channels, but they were dismissed, so I kept records, hoping someone would eventually listen. Jonathan Marlowe spoke for the first time. "The FBI will want to see this analysis. It corroborates much of what my investigation uncovered." The board chair nodded slowly. "Ms. Reynolds, we need someone to lead the cleanup. Someone with clean hands and the respect of both staff and clients. Would you accept the position of interim vice president while we restructure?" "With conditions," I said. They exchanged glances. "Which are?" "Full autonomy to clean house. Anyone implicated in wrongdoing goes, regardless of their connections. We implement new oversight systems, real ones, not the checkbox compliance we've been doing. And we establish a legitimate whistleblower program that doesn't root complaints through the very people being complained about." "That's aggressive," another board member said. "That's necessary," I countered. "Unless you want to be back here in 2 years having the same conversation about different people." The vote was unanimous. By 3 p.m., The news had broken wide open. CNBC ran a segment titled The Ravenbrook Scandal, a Tale of Greed and Betrayal. Lydia's photo appeared next to Ethan's under a chyron reading, Disgraced Executives Face Federal Charges. The Illinois Attorney General held a press conference, announcing that Lydia faced 15 counts of wire fraud, insider trading, and conspiracy. Each count carried up to 20 years. Even with a plea deal, she'd likely serve a decade. Ethan Brooks fared no better. Beyond the insider trading charges, investigators had uncovered years of embezzlement hidden in inflated vendor contracts and ghost employees. His wife's divorce attorney released a statement that she'd been cooperating with authorities for weeks, providing financial records that proved Ethan had been stealing from Ravenbrook since before Lydia even joined the company. At 4 p.m., I stood before the entire staff in the main conference room. My first address as interim VP. I won't sugarcoat this, I began. We've failed our clients, our shareholders, and each other. Trust takes years to build and seconds to destroy. We're starting from below zero. I looked at the faces before me, some fearful, some defiant, many simply exhausted. But we're going to rebuild. Those who operated with integrity have nothing to fear. Those who didn't, clean out your desks. The FBI has more warrants coming, and I've been asked to provide my full documentation to assist their investigation. The room went very quiet. Questions? Marcus raised his hand. What about our clients? Are they going to flee? Some will, I admitted. But I've been calling them personally. Most are willing to give us a chance to make this right. They want competence and honesty, not country club connections and creative accounting. As the meeting ended, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. I opened it to find a single line. You knew exactly what you were doing. Well played. L. I deleted it immediately. Lydia could send all the messages she wanted from federal custody. I had work to do. 1 week later, the Bloomberg headline read, Ravenbrook Capital Scandal. Former VP faces 180 years in federal prison. The accompanying photo showed Lydia being escorted from the federal courthouse in orange jumpsuit and shackles. Her perfectly styled hair was gone, replaced by a messy ponytail. The designer makeup had been stripped away, revealing the hollow eyes of someone who'd lost everything. The article detailed the investigation's findings. 47 counts of wire fraud, 23 counts of insider trading, 12 counts of conspiracy. The Cerberus hedge fund had been shuttered, its principals arrested in coordinated raids across 3 states. The money trail led to offshore accounts in the Caymans, Switzerland, and Singapore, $73 million in illicit gains. Jonathan Marlowe had been thorough. Beyond the divorce filing, he'd initiated civil suits that would pursue every hidden asset. The Lake Forest mansion was already in foreclosure. The art collection, the jewelry, the cars, all seized. Lydia's trust fund, the one she'd lorded over others, had been frozen pending investigation into whether family money had been used to facilitate the crimes. Ethan Brooks faced his own reckoning. His wife had filed for divorce with prejudice. Armed with 15 years of financial records showing systematic embezzlement, the board had voted unanimously to pursue criminal charges and civil recovery. His country club memberships had been revoked. His name was being chiseled off the charity buildings he'd donated to with stolen money. But the true devastation came from the industry itself. The Financial Times ran an op-ed titled The Marlowe Affair, When Privilege Becomes Poison. Every major firm in Chicago, New York, and London had blacklisted both of them. Their names had become synonymous with everything wrong in finance, the nepotism, the corruption, the belief that connections mattered more than competence. I stood in what used to be Lydia's office, now mine, watching the Chicago River wind through the city. The space had been stripped of her vanity, the designer furniture, the abstract art, the photos of her with various celebrities at charity galas. I'd replaced it all with simple, functional pieces. The only decoration was a photo of my parents at my graduation, proud faces above their borrowed formal clothes. Marcus knocked on the door. The Journal wants a statement from you about the reforms. Tell them the truth, I said. We're implementing blind performance reviews, transparent promotion criteria, and mandatory ethics training that isn't just a PowerPoint everyone clicks through. Real change, not cosmetic fixes. And if they ask about Lydia? I turned from the window. She made her choices. Now she's facing the consequences. That afternoon, I visited my parents in Minnesota. They'd read about everything, of course. The scandal had made national news. My mother hugged me tightly in their small kitchen that smelled of coffee and cinnamon rolls. "We're proud of you," my father said simply. "You stood up to them." "I destroyed them," I corrected. "They destroyed themselves," my mother said firmly. "You just made sure everyone could see it." We sat at the same wooden table where I'd done my homework, where I'd filled out college applications, where I'd dreamed of making something of myself in the big city. The table Lydia would have sneered at for being quaint. "Was it worth it?" my father asked. "All the planning, the risk?" I thought about the question, about the months of rage and meticulous documentation, about the satisfaction of watching Lydia's world implode, about the clients who'd thanked me for exposing the truth, about the junior analysts who now had a fair shot at advancement. "Yes," I said, "it was worth it." The next morning, I stood outside Ravenbrook Capitol, watching the early November sun paint the glass and steel golden. The building looked the same, but everything inside had changed. The old boys' club was dead. The culture of privilege and protection had been burned to the ground. My phone buzzed with a news alert. Lydia had agreed to a plea deal. 15 years in federal prison, no possibility of parole for 10. She'd testify against Ethan and the Cerberus principals in exchange for avoiding trial on the most serious charges. I thought about her words that had started all this. "You'll never be more than a mid-level manager here." She'd been wrong about that, but she'd also been right about something else. I didn't fit the culture of the old Ravenbrook, the culture of affairs and insider trading, of stolen credit and purchased influence. I was building something different now. A culture where a girl from a Minnesota factory town could rise on merit, where competence mattered more than connections, where the work spoke louder than whispered deals in hotel rooms. As I walked through the doors, security nodded respectfully. "Good morning, Vice President Reynolds." "Good morning," I replied, meaning it for the first time in years. Lydia had said I didn't fit the culture. She was right. So I'd burned that culture to the ground and built a better one from the ashes. Walking to the elevator. I allowed myself one last thought about Lydia Marlowe, probably lying awake in federal detention, designer life replaced by a number and a cell. She taught me the most valuable lesson of my career. In the right shadows, even a factory town girl could bring down an empire. I stepped into the elevator and pressed the button for the executive floor. My floor now. The doors closed on the past, and I rose toward a future I'd seized with my own hands. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're tuning in from. Drop a comment below, and let's connect. If you enjoyed this tale of corporate revenge, please subscribe to the channel and share your thoughts. What would you have done in Claire's position? Your stories and perspectives make this community special. Until next time.